Hello comrades, you are watching RedIvan Military, and today we'll talk about uniforms and equipment of the Ukrainian armed forces during the ATO 2014-2016. But before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, share this video with your friends, comment, subscribe to my Instagram, and also I teamed up with Kruschiki shop. So if you're looking for some surplus or maybe some cool tactical stuff, use the link in the description or my promo code RedIvan to get 5% discount. The political crisis in Ukraine began in November 2013, when President Yanukovych refused to sign an association agreement with the European Union. Some said the signing was merely postponed, others said it was completely cancelled. Either way, the protests started. The protests grew into the Euromaidan, and the Euromaidan led to Yanukovych's escape in February 2014, after which the crisis of central authority catalyzed separatist movements in the southeastern regions. Seizures of administrative buildings in Kharkov, Donetsk and Lugansk, signature collections for federalization near the trade union's house in Odessa, anti-Maidan in Zaporozhye, Nikolaev and Dnipropetrovsk. One way or another, some flare-ups were extinguished, while others turned into a fire. The point of no return was the capture of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk by Crimea unit led by Igor Girkin, also known as Strelkov, on April 12, 2014. On April 13, in response to this move, the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine decided to launch the ATO. On April 14, Turchinov, by his decree, enacted the NSDC's decision, and the ATO began.
Простите меня, мужики, за то, что не был в АТО. Пока вы там стреляли, я играл в домино. Но я за вас молился и постился. И пару раз кидал пятерочку в ящик.
So let's come back to the uniform and equipment, and here I need to make one important clarification. This thing is that 2010s in Ukraine were a golden era for military second-hand stores, domestic commercial gear, and foreign novelties. Terrible statutory uniform, the popularization of airsoft, geographic location, and growing purchasing power flooded the country with used DPM, Fliktarn, Woodland, Russian Gorkas, Miltech, Helicon, Emerson, Condor, and if you had money, proper and true spec. From domestic brands, Ataka, Combat SPN, Sputnik Gear and Pivanjitak appeared, STS expanded, and even the Cinderella store. What a time such a Cinderella. And so I physically can't cover all the non-statutory elements. In some units there were not even two identically equipped fighters. Therefore, we'll discuss what the war caught the Ukrainian army wearing, how statutory uniform and gear evolved during the ATO period. We'll also look at the examples of the most interesting and popular foreign and domestic commercial gear, as well as foreign second-hand items. So what did the ATO catch the AFU with? At that moment, the AFU issued synthetic uniforms of terrible quality in two dark camouflage patterns, Dubok and Butan-U. The names are quite conditional. In the army, both patterns were called Dubok, which means oak in English. But in reality, these are two different camouflage patterns. Butan-U is a Ukrainian stripped-down version of the Soviet Butan camouflage, scientifically Zebra 2, which with each generation was stretched more and more, making its camouflage properties increasingly conditional. Dubok, on the other hand, is an original camouflage pattern developed with a nod to Butan, but without direct copying. Both patterns are tricolored. Brown and black were printed over a green or reddish base. In Ukraine, it is common to criticize the Soviet Afghanka for its poor cut. But the kicker is that since the mid-2000s most servicemen haven't even seen real Afghankas. Until 1997, Ukrainian factories produced sets according to 1982 specification from Russian fabric of Soviet standard supplied from Ivanovo, as well as from local Butan-U. But with the adoption of Dubok in the late 90s, the set's cut was simplified. The backplate that provided freedom of movement was removed, the cut became tighter, especially on the pants, and the side pockets on the pants disappeared. But the cuff's design surprisingly became like the American BDU. Combined with low quality fabric, cheap buttons that fall off, and the camouflage pattern that doesn't work, you could really conclude this suit is bad. But I only realized how far it was from the Soviet version years later when I got my hands on the original Soviet suit. I'm wearing Ukrainian and Soviet suits now, same size. Compared to the MM14 size chart, the Ukrainian one is tight, while the Soviet one fits very loosely. Interestingly, the same processes were happening in Russia at the same time. In 2005, side pockets were also removed from the pants, and they also started saving fabric, making the suit tighter. The fabric quality in Russia also dropped, but it still was better than Ukraine's, especially the paratrooper version. That's why flora pattern suits were popular in Ukraine too. In the 2010s, Dubok was worn with a BDU style cap of an American cut, but Soviet style caps with ear flaps were also seen. Paratroopers, naval infantry and special forces wore uniforms with striped tельняшkas in dedicated colors, while other units wore olive t-shirts in the Ukrainian version of the 1991 Butan Camouflage, and interesting Turkish t-shirts in a local version of Duck Hunter Camouflage. Back in 2007 they issued those at my military lyceum. Besides the field suits, Soviet mesh KZS suits and KLMK masking coveralls were also used. In this video we won't focus on winter clothing, but the AFU's winter jacket back then was pretty cool. Its cut was better than the Soviet one, and rumors has it was designed with a Yugoslavian experience in mind. However, there were some issues with the winter clothing supply, and you could often see Soviet winter jackets in photos from ATO zone. Footwear. The main boots in the armed forces of Ukraine before the 2014 reform were so-called riflenki, fluted boots. These are solid leather boots with an American Panama sole, just stiffer than the original. Produced by the Talan company. Body armor at the start of ATO depended on luck and the specific unit. In most cases, these were Soviet 6B3 and 6B5 body armor vests, sometimes 6B4 as well, and Soviet steel helmets SSH-40, SSH-60 and SSH-68 like mine, and the whole range of Soviet pouches, covers and bags. But in some units you could find Aramid black Kaska-M and green early Kaska-1M helmets, as well as Korsar M3 body armor vests in Dubok camouflage. These were produced by the company Temp 3000. In Soviet times this company made 6B4 body armor vests, which were the most advanced body armor vests in Soviet army. In independent Ukraine, Temp 3000 became one of the country's key defense enterprises. Kaska-M and Kaska-1M helmets were rare beasts before 2014. I've only seen black Kaska-M helmets in photos of peacekeepers and the Iraq contingent. Green Kaska-1M helmets besides the above could be seen with the fighters of the 73rd Center and in photos of cadets at the Odessa Military Academy. But maybe that photo was taken at the base in Odessa, where Iraq contingent gear was stored. Kaska-M and early Kaska-1M helmets were made from Tvaron, a type of aramid. Korsar M3 vests were developed in 2002 and purchased for peacekeepers in Kosovo and the AFU contingent in Iraq. The earliest Korsar vest I've came across is from 2004, and they started issuing them to the contingent in Iraq since 2004 as well. Basically, Temp developed a desert version of the Dubok camouflage. I only have the desert version of the early Korsar, so we'll discuss its features looking at the desert vest. but desert Korsars were used in the ATO zone as well. On the front panel there are 3 pouches for 2 AK magazines each, 2 grenade pouches, a mounting point for a bayonet knife, up top, shoulder stoppers for a belt or a load-bearing vest, front and back pockets for steel plates of protection class 4, anti-fragmentation pockets are inside the vest. The vest can be equipped with a removable anti-fragmentation collar. The early version of the vest has a double cummerbund. The lower one is elasticated and fastening around the waist, while the upper one attaches directly to the front panel. And they were apparently made for hippos. The vest also has a built-in groin protector that can be tucked under the front panel. On the back there are odd loops with D-rings. Also their purpose is not described in the Korsar's passport. Someone told me that they are meant to secure the camelback, but I still have questions. Interestingly, Korsar M3 vests were exported to Transnistria, Georgia and Azerbaijan. In Ukraine, Korsars were mainly seen with peacekeepers, marines, some military academies and certain elite units. There were not enough of them to supply the entire army. The ATO sharply demonstrated the necessity to re-equip the armed forces. Fortunately, developments in this direction had been underway since Yanukovych's time. Since 2012, the AFU tested a uniform whose cut was copied from the Norwegians, to be more precise, an FM company, but in a Ukrainian forest digital camouflage. Winter and summer sets in this pattern were trialed by the 1st Battalion of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade in 2012-2013. And in this uniform the battalion performed tasks at the checkpoints near Crimea at the start of the ATO. A pre-production version of what we know as MM14 was tested by the 1st Battalion of the 95th Brigade since December 2013. For more of this and other AFU digital patterns, check out my linked video. The official version of the new uniform in the MM14 pattern, which later went into mass production, was showcased in August 21, 2014 at the Odessa Military Academy. The cut still copied NFM's and it was too costly and overcomplicated. Cap. The BDU style cap, no changes here, worn with an old AFU cockade based on the Soviet one. Jacket. Stand-up collar with velcro. A strap for ranks on the chest, closes with velcro. 2 chest pockets, closed with velcro and the Canadian button. The flaps on the pockets have fabric tabs. Above the pocket velcro panels for the army tape and the serviceman's last name. A Ukrainian flag is sewn on the sleeves. Below the flag a double sleeve pocket. Flap closes with velcro. Velcro panels for insignia are placed on both the pocket and the flap. The flap also has a fabric tab. Elbow reinforcements with pockets for elbow pads. Cuffs are secured with velcro. On the back there is a plate for increased freedom of movement. Also on the back there is a mounting panel for an infrared beacon. Why the hell this panel is there? The jacket fastens with velcro, a zipper and Canadian buttons. On the left side there is an internal pocket for documents without a flap and a white tag for markings. Trousers. The fly fastens with 2 Canadian buttons, large and small, and a zipper. 2 front slash pockets, wide single belt loops, waist size adjustment is done with a velcro panel, and an elastic strap, a very convenient solution. No rear pockets or reinforcements, BDU style cargo pockets, closed with 2 Canadian buttons, large and small, and the pocket opening is elasticated. The flap only closes halfway, so the pocket can be used as a dump pouch for magazines. Knee reinforcements with openings for knee pads. The pant leg is double layered, like on the Gorka. On the outside of the pant leg an elastic drawstring with a plastic lock and a plastic hook that attaches to the lace to keep the leg from riding up. but the pants were often tucked into the boots. Slavs. These suits were made from cotton or synthetic fabrics. I have a synthetic one, and as it turns out, it burns great. There was even a big scandal about it. The exact same suit, but in the Viper camouflage pattern, in parallel was supplied to the NGU. There was also a winter jacket based on the NFM's jacket. I only have this jacket in Viper camouflage, and we have already covered it in my video about the NGU, so check it out if you are interested. In May 2014, the Ministry of Defense placed an order for 24,000 Korsar's M3-1-4 vests, and from 2014 the Korsar M3 body armor became the standard model for AFU units. Now the vest was solid grayish green. The form factor stayed the same: 3 pouches for 2 AK magazines each, 2 grenade pouches, the same steel plates, and Kevlar packets, a mounting point for a bayonet knife up top, but the groin protector was removed and the cummerbund was simplified, making the vest less comfortable. Though I've seen models from the same year with a double cummerbund and the built-in groin protector, but with the same model name. Such times, the vest still featured shoulder stoppers for the rifle sling or a load-bearing vest, but just look, the right one is sewn on wrong. Ignore the smaller straps on the shoulders. The previous owner sewed them on himself. The flaps for the pouches also became square back in the mid-2000s, so this change isn't specific to this model as well. My vest was produced in June 2014. Interestingly, the Temp 3000 label is in Russian, but the manufacturing date and other details are in Ukrainian. Overall, Korsar isn't a good vest. The build quality is very low, the materials aren't durable enough, and it is impossible to fit it tightly, even though I have a pretty standard build. Size 50. Compared to the 6B23 and especially 6B45, it is just trash. And I won't even mention Western counterparts. In December 2014, the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Internal Affairs began purchasing the new Korsar M3S vest. This Korsar modification has a moly webbing and a quick release system. The cover is still grayish green, still low quality, minimal reinforcement stitching, and the moly is sewn unreliably. The vest comes with a 3-section open pouch for AK magazines. Each section holds 2 magazines. The magazines are secured with an elastic cord and the Fastex buckle. On one hand, 2 solutions at once is overkill. On the other, neither one works properly. The elastic cord tears quickly and loses elasticity, and the Fastex buckle releases under tension. A terrible and extremely cheap pouch. Thankfully, moly lets you to replace it with something else. 2 grenade pouches, closed with the same unreliable Fastex buckles, a removable medical pouch, and that's actually a pretty interesting solution with a cool design. And a rather unusual foldable dump pouch, a very interesting element. The vest comes with the removable groin protector, which can be detached or tucked under the front panel, and the removable neck module, which unfortunately I don't have. Let's pull the quick release. I can't say the vest is much better than its predecessor, but at least it has moly, so the user can replace the pouches. Over time the vest's fabric and color changed, but overall design remained unchanged, and it is still in use in the AFU today. Later, at the end of 2015, Temp 3000 introduced the Korsar M3M body armor, and for the first time since the 6B4, Temp's body armor brought back the climatic shock absorbing panels. Helmets. In spring 2014, the Ministry of Defense purchased Kaska-M helmets from Temp 3000. If you believe the internet, there were no Kaska-M helmets in the Ukrainian armed forces before spring 2014. But we trust nobody. Both Kaska-M and Kaska-M helmets were in the armed forces of Ukraine, and you could spot both in Iraq. Early Kaska-M helmets could be seen in the photos from Naval Special Forces demonstrations. Some Kaska-M helmets popped up in Crimea already with the Russians, and you remember that photo I showed earlier from the Odessa Military Academy. Interestingly, as we mentioned earlier, Kaska-M and early Kaska-M helmets were made from Tvaron, a type of aramid, while the helmets ordered in 2014 were made from UHM-WPE, with a black finish. But they still featured the same model designation, Kaska-M. That's Stamp's wonderful standardization for you. In the same year, helmets could be produced with different shell shapes, different suspension systems, and as we found out, even from different materials. But that did not prompt Stamp to change the model designation before or after 2014. Anyway, by June 6, 2014, the Ministry of Defense placed an order for 10,000 helmets, and in the first half of 2015, the Ukrainian armed forces received another 64,580 units. Thus, the black UHM-WPE helmet became the most common in the armed forces of Ukraine. My helmet is from 2014, protection class 1A. The helmet has a pretty uncomfortable and unpleasant chin strap system. The large buckle makes it impossible to adjust the chin strap evenly. The Fastex itself is low quality. It broke already and I replaced it with a similar one. Inside the helmet there is a foam padding that already peels off in places. The headband is made of a fleece-like material. The paint on the outside flakes and chips. They more or less got the helmet sorted out around 2018. You can recognize those by their olive color. In 2014-2015, the AFU issued helmets with a minimalist MM14 cover. And by late 2015, a more advanced cover appeared, which is still used today. In July 2015, a new AFU field uniform was showcased, with Konstantin Lesnik from Pivanjetak contributing to its creation. This time they developed a layered system with a winter jacket, a Polartec fleece, underwear, but we'll only discuss the summer field set. First, a new Mazepinka cap appeared. We already talked about its history in another video, so I encourage you to watch that one. Jacket, made from two fabric variants, twill and ripstop. Stand-up collar without velcro, though the earliest version had velcro. Rank insignia are placed on the velcro panel on the chest. Two chest pockets with horizontal asses, one side is closed with a zipper and the other one with velcro. These pockets provide easy access when wearing body armor vest or a load-bearing system. Above the pockets there are velcro panels for the serviceman's last name and the army tape. Sleeve pockets with horizontal access, close with zippers. The pocket has a velcro panel for patches with a pen slot. And the flag is now attached with velcro. On the back there is a plate for increased freedom of movement. Elbow reinforcements with pockets for elbow pads. Cuffs with velcro. The jacket fastens with a zipper and velcro. On the inside on the left, there is a pocket for documents. Trousers. Fly fastens with a zipper and a Canadian button. Two deep slash pockets. Wide belt loops for an officer's belt. A waist size adjustment is done with a velcro panel and a velcro strap. Cargo pockets fastened with a velcro at the back, while the front is simply sewn shut. A very interesting solution. No rear pockets. Knee reinforcements with pockets for knee pads. At the bottom of each pant leg there is a pocket for a first aid kit. The pant leg is secured with a velcro top and a velcro panel over the boot. Also, in 2015, alongside the MM14 uniform, they produced a uniform in the Varan AFU Camouflage for paratroopers. This version of Varan camouflage pattern slightly differs from the original Pivanjetak pattern, but the production stopped after 2015. I am actually looking for a Varan AFU uniform in size 50-4 to record the video comparison with an original pattern, so if you can help me to source one, please hit me up. Overall, this uniform is very successful. It is still used in the Ukrainian armed forces, and the design is still relevant. It is more advanced than the American ACU or Russian VKPO. Though recently new Russian uniform variants VKPO 2.0, 2.1, 3.0 and 3.1 have appeared, and they are better than the Ukrainian one, but overall the Ukrainian suit is still relevant and comfortable. With the new uniform came new underwear and a trouser belt. But for a long time they kept wearing this uniform with Soviet officers' brown leather belt, and maybe some still do. Also, in airborne, naval infantry and special forces units, they wore this uniform with striped тельняшка shirts in matching colors up until the Soviet-style berets were phased out in 2017 and 2018. But there were photos of тельняшkas being worn at the start of the 2022 war and maybe even later. Along with the new uniform, Konstantin Lesnik pushed through the adoption of the new footwear. For the first time in a post-Soviet army, trekking boots were issued. And thanks to my friend Timur, you are seeing a rare early 2015 version here. They were called Kruschiki or ginger in the field for their distinctive color. The more common later version is dark brown. So this 2015 version is very rare now. Thanks again to Timur. The 2015 uniform, Kaska-M helmet, Korsar M3S vest and Talan trekking boots are still in use in the armed forces of Ukraine today. Of course, after 2022 the quality of the uniform's material dropped. I came across a Turkish version of 2023, total junk, so servicemen often rely on volunteer aid or buy better equipment themselves. It was the same during the ATO. Ukrainian commercial gear. Back in March 2014, P1G privately equipped Crimean naval infantry units, relocated from Crimea to Nikolaev, with SPFU suits in Jaba camouflage. There was a hope that the state would pick up the initiative and the Marines would get their own cool camouflage. But like with Varan for the airborne, no one followed through. Still, soldiers in the ATO zone kept buying Jaba Polevaya with their own money. All the cool guys wore Jaba camouflage. Combat divers, 8th Regiment Special Forces, Naval Infantry units, volunteers. Mabuta Mark II suit was especially good. We'll talk more about it in a future video. Besides Woodland Jaba, Field Toad, P1G also produced Steppe Toad, Varan, ATAX AU, Multicam, and even EMR. And all these items found use in the ATO. Rumors say that EMR was even used by sabotage recon groups. In my opinion, P1G's EMR is still the best version of that pattern, just like their MM14. These guys definitely know how to fix the broken camouflage. Another domestic camouflage manufacturer was Combat SPN with their Hishnik, Hijak or Predator pattern. This pattern was developed by a veteran of the 73rd Center and later adopted for NGU supply. The AFU also appreciated Gorkas in this pattern. Gorkas. Oh man, Gorkas were especially popular during the ATO. Those who got lucky scored Russian ones from bars or SSO. I remember back before the war in 2013, cadets from the reconnaissance faculty of the Odessa Military Academy returned from the joint Russian-Ukrainian exercises decked out in brand new bars Gorkas. But Ukrainian manufacturers didn't lag behind. Before 2014, Gorkas in Ukraine were mostly imported from Russia. But with the start of the ATO, everyone and their dog started sewing them. Additionally, a whole bunch of companies like Kamotech popped up, not bothering to design their own suits or patterns, just making statutory uniforms from better materials, like Belarusian Greta fabric, for example. Yep, back then the best MM14 fabric was supplied from Belarus, or in second hand. As we said earlier, in those years Ukraine was the last resort for retired aging NATO camouflages, a paradise for airsofters, militarists and servicemen. Back then it was normal to attend formations in statutory Dubok, but head out to field training in comfy NATO surplus. Those same cadets at the Odessa Military Academy wore British Desert DPM sets for training. And if the camouflage was green and the cut close to statutory, they turned a blind eye to wear it daily. For example, in military lyceum I wore American Woodland. And during officer reserve training at the Odessa Military Academy, I often wore True Spec Tiger Stripe, which the officers for some reason called pajamas. There must be some interesting pajamas they have. And so the ATO zone was flooded from day one with British DPM, DDPM, MTP, German flag turn, American so-called universal camouflage pattern, tricolor desert, to a lesser extent American Woodland, which was brought in from Poland. OCP was almost non-existent in the ATO back then, since it was only adopted in the US in 2014 and issued in masses by 2015, so it just didn't make it in time. There might have been some OEF CP around, but it was pretty rare itself, so most likely all the multicam in the ATO was either Chinese, P1G TAC, or something European. French CCE could be spotted as well. Interestingly, because their camouflages were used in the ATO, the Germans banned the resale of their military uniforms on the secondary market. Also, thanks to British uniforms, combat shirts are still called uboks in Ukraine. Russian camouflages were also used on the Ukrainian side in the ATO. Flora, which was a coveted purchase even before the ATO, some EMR showed up too, which is very exciting. There was also a ton of Belarusian digital camouflage, but it was very poor quality. In this photo, a fighter is wearing Russian statutory EMR pants from 2010, a C95 jacket in DPM, and a liner from a statutory Dubok winter coat. What a mix! Besides second-hand, people eagerly bought commercial suits from Helicon, True Spec, Miltech, and other brands. And you could buy all this stuff at militarist stores, known today to young as a military brand MTAC. Back then they imported airsoft gear, uniforms and equipment from Europe. Since there were complaints about the issue at body armor and there wasn't enough of it for everyone at the start, foreign manufacturers came to the rescue. Helmets. Polish VZ2000, VZ2005 and even VZ93 helmets. The NGU issued them alongside Kaska-M and they showed up in the AFU too, mostly in their original covers. Really good helmets. Iconic Kevlar passguard helmets were very common. There was even a weird, still Israeli-made passguard analog. German Schubert helmets were used, famous British Mark VI and Mark VII, and for the rich kids you even see the Mich 2000 type helmets. But those were crazy expensive. To have a Mich 2000 helmet at the beginning of the war, you probably had to be a Kiev Airsoft reenactor. Body armor was a similar story. British Osprey Mark II was very common, and Osprey Mark III less so. Getting an Osprey Mark IV was a dream, but possible. French body armor showed up, American OTV, Polish Maskpol KWM-02, Siras, mostly Chinese knockoffs, LBT 6094 and its analogs. Honestly, the ATO was a peak of plate carriers in the post-Soviet space. And of course the FOPC from P1G TAC. Load-bearing systems. From Western stuff, British load-bearing gear in DDPM stood up the most. Both early versions with fixed pouches and later ones with molly system. British chest rigs, so-called security guard vests. Back then they were extremely popular. Miltech, Black Hawk and everyone and their dog made them. But honestly, back then, like just now, the best load-bearing gear was made in the post-Soviet space. Of course, local copies of the Smersh load-bearing system were used a lot. The Ukrainian Vityaz LBS from Sputnik Gear. Basically, it is a Ukrainian adaptation of the Smersh with improved elements. You can easily adjust the system without taking it apart, unlike the Smersh, thanks to detachable loops. Vityaz includes 2 AK magazine pouches on each side, holding 8 to 12 magazines in total, 4 grenades, and 4 ROP signal flares. 2 utility pouches, I don't have enough space for them on my belt. A radio pouch, a combat backpack, and a detachable patrol backpack. Khmelnytsky and Kirovograd Special Forces, naval infantry units, and other fighters loved these load-bearing systems. AK-6 and AK-12 chest rigs from STS, Frogman AK Chest Rig from P1G TAC. This chest rig holds 8 AK magazines, secured with a strap that pushes them out, like the strap on the Makarov holster. It also had extra molly panels for other gear. The FWS load-bearing system from P1G TAC, essentially a hybrid between a load-bearing harness and a combat belt. Before the ATO, Ukrainian paratroopers had the SD1 load-bearing vests in service, but it doesn't show up in the ATO. But instead I often see an unknown Dubok pattern load-bearing vest. And also I found couple pictures of Temp's Pustynya 3. In this video I don't want to dive into backpacks, considering the standard issue was still a duffel bag and an RD-54, compared to which even a school backpack is a peak of scientific progress. So any nylon backpack with 2 straps in a protective color was worth its weight in gold. For footwear, besides statutory boots and domestic commercial boots with textile inserts, Miltech jungle boots, German army boots, British army boots, and American army boots were popular. The really crafty guys tried to score Altama, Belleville, or Crispy. All this was complemented by standard Soviet gear. 4 cell pouches for AK and RPK magazines, grenade pouches, Soviet leather Makarov holsters, MPL-50 entrenching tool in its original cover, Soviet canvas ponchos, Soviet pouches for VOG-25 grenades, ROP and RSP signal flares, Soviet 6x5 and 6x4 bayonets, statutory canteen, general issue with a mess kit, or a combined airborne one. But often fighters used American plastic canteens, British canteens, or even camelbacks, which were starting gaining popularity. However, once my friend who'd been in combat told me a funny story how he tore his camelback and nearly soaked his drone and then left without water. On top of that, in the low temperatures, I heard that the tube of the camelback can freeze. So the overall reliability of camelbacks is questionable. I would stick to the old good canteen. Some guys just ran around with water and plastic bottles, and this practice started back in Iraq. Soviet bandages and S-mark tourniquets were also used, often wrapped around the stock in true Slavic fashion. Of course, this medical gear wasn't enough. That's where volunteers stepped in, helping source NATO first aid kits, protective goggles, masks, knee pads, and so on. In fact, this kind of volunteer support started with the ATO, and massive usage of non-statutory uniforms and equipment on both sides inevitably led to the issues with fender for identification. Enters the yellow duct tape. They slapped yellow duct tape on everything they could. Of course, similar identification methods were used back in Afghanistan, with white bandages as an armbands. And then the practice carried over to the conflicts in the post-Soviet space. But the sheer amount of tape marking everything from helmets to boots was unprecedented before the ATO. Weapons: AK-74 and AKS-74 rifles, AKS-74U, AKM and AKMS for recon and rear units. Recons use them because they can fire subsonic rounds with the PBS-1 suppressor. GP-25 underbarrel grenade launchers, PKM and RPK-74 machine guns, earlier RPKs in 7.62x39. Though even older machine guns showed up, the ATO exposed the shortage of machine guns in the armed forces of Ukraine. Pistols: PM Makarov, PB, Stechkin's automatic pistol, and 4 pistols were used. SVD sniper rifles, sometimes you'd even see exotic stuff from Zbroyar. But unlike the NGU, no towers or aces here. Maybe a couple of towers with special forces, at most, but no widespread outside the parades. And the Vulcan rifle was adopted by the SSO a bit later, around 2017. It was also the era of weapons upgrades, so the common trick was slapping an aluminum handguard on an AK, adding a forward grip and a Chinese red dot. Locally made Strela flash hiders were especially popular. For SVDs, a popular modification was a Picatinny rail adapter and a variable scope, since most PSO scopes were past their service life by then. Also in 2015 the Mayak factory developed an upgrade kit for Kalashnikov rifles, something like the Russian KM AK. And just like the Russian KM AK, they just ruined a few perfectly good Soviet rifles. Slavic roots. Today I prepared 5 sets for you. Uniform and equipment of a fighter at the beginning of the ATO, statutory uniform and equipment after the 2014 reform, statutory uniform and equipment after the 2015 reform, the gear of a special force recon fighter, and the 5th, a special one, the uniform and gear of the 95th Brigade fighter defending Donetsk airport in December 2014. Okay comrades, I hope you like this video, subscribe to my channel, put like, comment, share this video with your friends. If you want to help channel financially, links are in the description and YouTube subscription is available for us right now. And I'll see you next time. Bye!